Robservations with Robert, Meyer, Burnett.
Well, greetings, imagination connoisseurs. Once again, it is I, your Duke of Dope Discourse, your master of fun and wonder, your viceroy of verisimilitude, and, well, all of those things and more. Today is a very special day on Robservations. At least, I'd like to acknowledge a very special day. As you know, all of us here are imagination connoisseurs, which means we were born and bred to be imagination connoisseurs. We've been imagination connoisseurs, I would imagine, since we are very young. And one of the things that you need to do, well, I think what we need to do is we always need to be mindful of the next generation of imagination connoisseurs. And today is a very special day for one 6-year-old birthday boy, Braxton Bowles. It's his 6-year anniversary of being alive on this planet. He's spun around the sun 6 times. And he is, of course, a foundational member of the Post-Geek Singularity community. And I wanted to wish him the very best of birthdays today. So, Braxton, you, my friend, you are on the right path. As a 6-year-old, well, it's the oldest you've ever been. So you're supposed to be the best you can ever be, the best you ever will be. Of course, the best is always yet to come, right? And it is. But being 6 was awesome. I loved being 6. You know what I got when I was 6? I got a G.I. Joe Jeep for the 12-inch Adventure Team G.I. Joes. That's what I got when I was 6. I don't know what you're going to get, but knowing your father and your sibling and your mother, I'm sure you're going to have the best birthday ever. And I'm here to wish you here in the middle of the day. You're probably in school right now, so you're not hearing this anyway. Or maybe you just got home. Very happy birthday to you, Braxton. And you're a good man. I can't wait to hear what you think of, well, I'd like to say the next Star Trek series, but we all know that you're a fan of The Next Generation and the original series and Deep Space Nine and Voyager and Enterprise. So let's keep it that way, Braxton. I wish you all the best, and so does everyone here at the Burnettwork and Robservations. Happy birthday, sir. May your wishes all come true. And remember, you have a great, long, fruitful life ahead of you. Make the most of it. Who knows? Maybe you'll make it to Mars one day. I don't know. Anyway, Braxton Bowles, ladies and gentlemen, a 6-year-old imagination connoisseur. And we have to make sure that all of our newly minted imagination connoisseurs are, like Dr. McCoy said at the end of Star Trek, the motion picture, that we get them all off to a good start. Kind of like V'ger. So, Braxton, there you go. I've been very heartened to read the enthusiastic response, for the most part, to Coming to America 2. People seem to really like it. I can't wait to jump into that. And, oh, by the way, what's tonight at midnight? That's right, the end of WandaVision. Very, very, very excited. And before anybody asks me, yes, I did see the strange thing on Twitter that I will mention just because everybody's been asking me about it. What is that strange thing, you might ask yourselves? Well, this was interesting. So today, 6 hours ago, Twitter, the account of Twitter, the verified Twitter account says, writing bios today, who wants one? Spider-Man No Way Home, the official Spider-Man movie Twitter account said, what have you got for me? And Twitter wrote back, hashtag Spider-Man No Way Home starring Tom Holland, Zendaya, Jacob Batalon, Tobey Maguire, and Andrew Garfield, only in movie theaters this Christmas. I mean, did they have to drop that before WandaVision? I don't know, but isn't that interesting? If you follow this thread down, there's a lot of interesting stuff going on here. Twitter said, Spider-Man movie, your move. There is a lot of craziness happening here. You know what? I don't even know what to say. But we'll see. at this point, all bets are off. But we do have the end of WandaVision tonight at midnight Pacific time. So who knows what's going to happen? I don't know. I thought I would bring that up because everybody has been asking me about that. So I have so many letters today. So I thought that I would just start out with one that's, well, admittedly self-serving. Dave Kukol writes in, and Dave Kukol says, "Hello, Rob. Here is my review of Tango Shalom." For most of you, you'll know that Tango Shalom is a movie that I produced. I also edited. I was the visual effects supervisor and the post-production supervisor on the film, and I have spent the last couple of years, actually the better part of half a decade, getting the movie finished. Truly a labor of love. Anything you ever thought about in terms of independent cinema, Tango Shalom represents all of those things and more. And yesterday, Tango Shalom aired on the internet. It was on the Toronto Film Channel, and it won the Toronto Film Awards happened, and we won Best Independent Feature Film, which is great, following up on our Best Comedy Award and the Best Actor Award from the Montreal Independent Film Festival. So thank you for that. But so maybe this is self-serving, but I'm curious because a lot of people watch it, and I want to thank you for watching it. But David wrote in with a review. I've not read this review. I'm just going to jump right into it. "Hello, Rob. Here's my review of Tango Shalom. After searching the internet, I found the movie on the Sacramento Jewish Film Festival site and was pleased to support it. As you were involved in editing the film and producing, I paid particular attention to this aspect of the production, but I was not prevented from being engulfed in the story. Your vocal cameo in the flashback sequence was an amusing note on which to begin the proceedings, and I particularly enjoyed the sequence of various slice-of-life scenes that introduced the character Moshe Yehuda and his family. This was an effective and amusing example of show don't tell, which emphasizes that film is a visual medium. Nicely done. I know you didn't write or direct the film, but with your indulgence, I will proceed to give my overall thoughts on the piece. Joe Slaniato brought a great warmth and pathos to the role of Moshe Yehuda. I liked him instantly and enjoyed sharing his triumphs and failures throughout the story. The contacts and friendships he built across cultural boundaries was touching and could teach us all a thing or two about the real world. This is not just fluffy comedy. The cast was uniformly excellent, and the amazing Karina Smirnoff stole my heart as Viviana, the dance instructor. I don't want to get into spoilers, as I encourage every imagination connoisseur to seek out this film and experience it for themselves. Suffice to say her arc and that of Moshe amounted to a satisfying journey. A word about the setting. While I reside in Massachusetts, I lived in New York for 7 years and returned to the city as often as I could until COVID hit. The pandemic has prevented me from visiting New York City for over a year, and I miss it greatly. Tango Shalom contains some breathtaking linking footage of the city, and I wonder how much freedom you were given to choose those shots. Oh, I worked directly with Gabe, the director, and we picked all those shots together. The images made me realize how much I missed New York, but also gave me a great comfort and enveloped me in a feeling of joy. Suffice to say, I love this film. There were moments where I laughed, gasped, and even felt tears welling up in my eyes. On several episodes of your and other people's shows, you have said things like, "It's not Apocalypse Now, and it's not the usual fare viewed by imagination connoisseurs, etc." This film needs no such apologies. It need not compete with other movies. Tango Shalom succeeds in what it sets out to do with great style and panache. As much as I'm invested in the books, TV, and films that I love, it's good to step out of one's comfort zone and experience something fresh and different. I felt revitalized after watching Tango Shalom, and even my familiar interests have a renewed sense of wonder about them. Kudos to the cast, director Gabe Bologna, the writers Joe Slaniato, Claudio Laniato, and Joseph Bologna, and to you, Mr. Burnett. Tango Shalom is a tasty treat with depth and heart. I'd be interested in learning how you became involved with the project, unless you covered it in one of your 600-plus episodes and I missed it. What is everyone waiting for? Seek out the movie and enjoy. Peel the banana, which I will leave for you to discover on your own. That was my editorializing. Regards, David. Well, first of all, David, thank you for watching the film. Yes, it did screen. It is currently available. You can see it in Sacramento. It is part of the Sacramento Jewish Film Festival. I don't know if it's geo-blocked, or you can all go there and buy a ticket and get it. I think they allow you 2 days to see it. It's going to be rolling out across the country in different places. I know that it's going to, I don't know what I can say, or I think I can say that it's going to Chicago. It's going to be at the Chicago International Jewish Film Festival. But it will be in places in the Midwest and on the East Coast and maybe in Florida, but I can't tell you where. So you can see it, and we will be rolling it out across festivals for the rest of the year, as we are looking for all worldwide rights are available. We really haven't sent it to distributors because we wanted to put it out into the world and show people how everyone responded to the film. So your review, sir, makes us all happy, and it's actually useful to us to hear that. And to be quite honest, I didn't know when you work on a film, you don't know how it's going to be received. I've worked on my career has been full of working on a lot of low-budget indie movies, sometimes mostly micro-budget indie films, and you never know how they're going to be received. I've never really broken through because as an editor and a filmmaker, I've never had great commercial success yet. That doesn't mean I don't think the work that I've done wasn't worthy of commercial success. But, when you're working on micro-budget films, movies that, when I say micro-budget, well, $1 million or less, or $2 million or less, it's really hard to have those movies make any kind of a splash. So it's hard, but I'm very proud of all the work that I've done. Mike Hurst made a movie that I edited back in 2015 that came out, I think, in 2016, or maybe it came out in 2015, called Paradox. And while that film was made for $250,000 or thereabouts, I was really proud of the work I did as an editor because I hadn't really edited action before, but the last 30 minutes really is one long protracted scene of tension and action. And I was really proud of the film. I mean, it was only designed to go, it was never really going to be a theatrical film, although it did open in Hollywood in a theater in Hollywood Boulevard. And I was really proud of it. But I think of all the things that I've done from an editorial standpoint, from a producerial standpoint, just because I had so much active involvement in getting Tango Shalom made and the way it was shaped, I think it's one of the things I'm most proud of in terms of filmmaking ability on display. Again, I was given a lot of leeway to edit the film, and Gabriel Bologna, who edited the film, and we were pretty much there every step of the way. There were certain things that I did that I said, listen, let me do this thing and put it together, and I'll show you what I mean. And one of the things that we did, because you brought it up, was the opening of the movie was always problematic. There were these really long scenes establishing everything, and I don't think it wasn't working the way we wanted it to work. And I said to Gabe, listen, he was in New York and I was here, and I said, I have an idea about really truncating the beginning, and let's intercut all of these scenes that I thought they kind of they didn't work as much as I think I would have wanted them to, and then it just, when you're editing movies, they say you write movies 3 different times. You write them on the page, you write them when you're shooting them, and then you do the final rewrite when you're in the edit bay. And I think one of the things in the edit room, which you really can tell when you get in and you start playing with footage and editing it together, a lot of the time, movies tell you the same things over and over in different ways. So when you have all these things laid out and they're in front of you, you can start to trim those things away so you don't keep saying the same thing over and over and over again. And one of the things all the footage at the beginning of Tango Shalom taught me was, as I looked at it, and you have to go through it, you have to cut it all together. You have to. It's one of the things it was a lesson I learned when I worked on the Lord of the Rings special features. For the extended editions, I did the editorial pieces on both Fellowship of the Ring and Two Towers, and one of the things that was really imparted to me is that Peter Jackson's editors would always say that, well, Peter Jackson wanted everything cut. If you shot it, he wants to look at it. You if it's been cut, you shoot it, and you see. I mean, if you shoot it, you cut it. And you look at what's been done, and you see what you have, because you never know when things are going to be useful. And more often than not, you're trimming things away. And one of the things about Tango Shalom, the whole opening of the movie, that montage, was something that we did not late in the process, but I would say in the midst of the process, and it really worked. and it speeded up the film. It made it buoyant. It gave it the kind of energy that we wanted. And we cut down what was going to end up being, it was just too long, like 25 minutes. And we cut it down into, 8? And it just worked much better. And these are things that you discover. This is why I love the process of editing so much, is because it's very iterative. You're constantly working and changing and moving things around. And that's one of the joys of nonlinear editing. And I think that you asked me how I got involved in the movie. I've told this story before, but I'll tell it again because I think it's worth talking about as an interesting Hollywood story. So obviously, in my case, I had work under my belt. I had edited feature films, and as a matter of fact, I was in the middle, or I had just edited Paradox, and I think I was editing a Lifetime movie with my friend Darren Scott, who directed the film. It was a movie called I Know Where Lizzie Is, a thriller. And I went to visit my college roommate, one of my oldest friends, my friend Todd. He was staying at the Hollywood Roosevelt Hotel, and he was representing a client of his, author, and they were down in Hollywood taking meetings to see if they could sell the book. There was a lot of interest in it. And we were just hanging outside, and he was waiting for me. We were at the Roosevelt, and I was getting my car. And I'm literally standing out there talking to him. And the AFM, the American Film Market, was having an event at the Roosevelt Hotel at the same time. So there was a woman waiting for, I guess, her Uber or her car to be brought around. And she just turned and asked us if we knew anything, like where she was guided. I don't know what she even asked us. Her name was Judy Beecher. Turns out she was the executive producer and one of the stars of Tango Shalom. And we just started talking. And she told me that the movie had been shot and they had not had an editor because, as many independent productions, things happen. And they literally hadn't had anyone working on post on the film since it had been shot for almost a year. It had been, this was in April. And the movie was shot the previous July. And it hadn't been edited. Actually, it's not true. They had another editor working on it who did a few scenes for a sizzle reel, and they wanted to raise more money for post. So there was like 2 scenes done, but very preliminary. And so I just said, I'm an editor. And she gave me the number of Gabe, the director, and I called Gabe up and gave him a little bit of my credits and said I'd worked on these films and produced these things. And I said, not only am I a film editor, but I'm also a post-production supervisor, and I know a little bit about a lot of things when it comes to filmmaking, so I might be able to help you out and help you minimize your costs, and we can do things not as expensive as some other ways of doing things, because I kind of specialize in that and had been since the late 90s. So we met. We had a very long sake-soaked lunch. And Gabe, we got along famously right away, and he goes, "Well, let's try it. Why don't we start?" And then I talked to the producers in New York, and I got along with them. And at the time, we were in the midst of the CBS lawsuit with the Axanar project, which was a movie I was going to be directing, a Star Trek fan film, and we were 6 months. Actually, we're not quite 4 or 5 months into that lawsuit, and it was rather depressing. So they gave me the job, and I started working on the film. The first thing I did was I had to look through all the footage, as an editor does, what I like to do, especially since I wasn't there when it was being shot. I didn't even know really what the movie was about, and at first I didn't read the script. I didn't want to read the script because, to me, what I want to look at because of where I was in the process, normally as an editor, I would read the script from the very beginning, and I'd be meticulously looking at everything as the footage came in, but it was already shot, and Gabe had already told me that some of the production was a mess. So I said, okay, let me look at what you got, and I went through it day by day and looked at everything, and it was indeed, let's call it, a daunting task. It was certainly a low-budget production that had a lot of challenges to surmount, let's put it that way, which excited me as a creative person. I'm like, I love that. I love fixing problems when it comes to filmmaking. And so that's how I began. And for the first month, I think I was going through the footage and making sure we had everything. And then Gabe and he asked if, I prefer, it depends. A lot of people work differently. Like an editor, when you work on a studio picture, an editor starts cutting the second day of production. Or if you're working on an effects-heavy movie, an editor sometimes is brought in way early because you're getting in animatics, and if it's effects heavy, you're getting in different effect shots, and you can start cutting those together and see what you have. But normally, for the most part, on let's call it a regular movie that doesn't have special effects or anything like that, even though most movies today do, but for the most part, you start on day 2 because you have to get the first day's footage in to start cutting. So, and a lot of the time, because you're in production, the director might visit the edit bay occasionally, depending on what kind of a director it is, but you work as an editor, you create what's called an assembly, where you're getting in all the footage, and it depends how much leeway you're given, but you cut scenes together, and you see if they work, if there's enough coverage to make sure that the film works from scene to scene. So you come up with an assembly cut. That's even before you're working with a director, but since the movie had already been shot and I'd gone through the footage, Gabe and I pretty much worked together in tandem, which to me is my favorite way to work. I love working with somebody, especially when I don't have an assistant editor, and I worked with Gabe and I together, every step of the way. There were times when I wanted to do things like there was some montage elements to the movie, and there was some structural things that I wanted to do where he would let me go. And then at one point we were trying to raise some money, so I put together a 30-minute we had a 30-minute chunk of the movie that we really, really liked. And he went away for a couple of weeks, and I did an entire temp sound mix in 5.1 of that 30 minutes. So I did everything. And so when you watch that 30 minutes, it felt like you were watching a finished film. I did some color timing, and then he would come back, and we worked together for a number of years to get it where it is. So that's the story of Tango Shalom. And now to see it out there and people seem to like it, that's very gratifying. So thanks, David. I really appreciate you watching it. And a lot of other people, members of the Post-Geek Singularity community, you have all been very sweet. So thank you for your kind words. That was very nice. This letter comes from Black Philip Alvarez. Greetings, Rob, and my fellow Post-Geek Singularity community, back again with another letter. My second one to Robservations. So last night I watched both Small Soldiers and Pump Up the Volume. I debated whether this letter was more appropriate for Let's Get Physical Media or Robservations, yet given the state of the letters as of late, it's more appropriate for Robservations. Both movies are 30 and 20 plus years old, yet still hold up today with their messages. I'll start with Small Soldiers, with the war mentality, or perhaps a metaphor for our own perspective of war at the time. The toys themselves didn't hesitate to create a war no matter the cost. They didn't consider the lives at stake, they just wanted to complete the mission at hand. Was it an anti-war film disguised as a so-called kids movie? Maybe or maybe not, since it was rated PG-13. The toys didn't hold back one bit and went to any length to not only destroy the Gargantites, but anyone who supported them. How is this not an allegory for how our perception of war is even today? What is really worth fighting for? You tell me, Rob, please. Well, I think life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, perhaps? Now on to Pump Up the Volume, a movie that is 30 frickin' years old, yet still deals with issues we all deal with every day. It handles both suicide and homosexuality. The host of the show himself felt guilty when that student committed suicide, even after turning to him for maybe help or guidance. Both issues that even today are definitely far from being cliched. Now they are becoming front and center. It involves a culture that is still dealing with acceptance and trying to define its own right in such a judgmental society. I won't go too deep into the subject, but these two films set a standard of what society is still dealing with today. If you choose to go deeper into it, then that is your right, Rob. I'm sure your audience would love to see your perspective on the matter as well as myself. Otherwise, this letter would be pointless. I've struggled this past month and even taken a leave of absence from my job. In conclusion, it seems as of late people have sent in letters that are far more personal, and yet you welcome them with open arms and respectfully given your 2 cents. I guess it also shows how much people respect your insight, as we expect it to be honest and real. I just want to know if watching these two films back-to-back was a mere coincidence or a sign of the times. Thank you, Rob, for always allowing your viewers to express themselves in letters or tips and giving responses that we know are legit and respectful. This is certainly what we need right now. Take care and be safe out there. Together, we are one. Well, Black Phillip Alvarez, I would say that that is a fantastic letter. And as you know, great minds think alike, because last week I too picked up Pump Up the Volume because I'm a big fan of the Eat Me, Beat Me lady. Thank God. Thank you, Warner Archive, for putting this out. I love this movie. As a matter of fact, when we were casting Free Enterprise, Samantha Mathis was somebody who came in. And she was definitely somebody that I was looking at because of Pump Up the Volume. And I'm a huge fan of hers. And, of course, BB Besh is her mother. And she actually thanked us for honoring the memory of her mother in Star Trek, in Free Enterprise from Star Trek II, because the characters, obviously, they go see Star Trek II in the movie. And she was very, very sweet, very nice. I'm a huge fan of hers. I've always been a huge fan of hers. And that was really the first time that I had seen her. It was her first major film role. So, but back to your question, one of the things about movies, great movies, I think great movies have a lot to say, whether they're made 20 years ago, like Small Soldiers was, or 30 years ago, the way Pump Up the Volume was. I think there are specific and also general human truths that are contained in films, which is why people go back to them. And I think the best movies are those, like even in Small Soldiers, which you could look at as a fantasy film where toys come to life, and wage war. Even that can make a film that can make a statement about the futility of war and the waste of it all. And obviously, one of the things about being an imagination connoisseur is that we have learned to see value and things that are worthwhile in genre cinema. So many people my whole life dismissed science fiction, fantasy, and horror. I mean, there was always the films that they would look to and go, well, these are real movies, whether it was Rosemary's Baby or The Exorcist, or, certainly the original Frankenstein had stuck around where it had enough credibility to be considered valid. But for the most part, a lot of the science fiction and fantasy and horror films that I grew up with were considered fairly disposable by the intelligentsia. I mean, even when Star Wars came out, you had basically a film that was an A-list Hollywood production that was really a throwback to Flash Gordon serials and a space fantasy. And certainly when Star Wars came out, there was a lot of detractors, especially from the science fiction community, who poo-pooed it and said that it wasn't very good science fiction and that it just wasn't what it should have been. And I always thought that was so silly, because obviously Star Wars has a lot of messaging in it, basically, ultimately, that we're all Luke. We can all dig deep into ourselves and find something about ourselves that we're destined to be more, or to do something greater than we might have thought. I think that's a lesson all of us need to learn, or all of us need to heed. And with Pump Up the Volume and Small Soldiers, I think you're absolutely right. If you see the value in Small Soldiers, of course it's an anti-war allegory, and it's teaching kids, I think, a lesson, and adults. I think Small Soldiers worked really well. I really like Small Soldiers. Remember, Joe Dante had made Gremlins, and I think he was the perfect director for it, and I think he absolutely did some great stuff with that film. And Pump Up the Volume, what I find so interesting now is, I love Pump Up the Volume, but it deals with issues of censorship and free speech and personal responsibility, and also public responsibility. And, the idea that in a way, it's so prophetic in the sense that Happy Hard Harry, played by Christian Slater, he's on a pirate radio station that he started, and he becomes a figure that all the students of his school are listening to, and he threatens the establishment. And when he's wrongfully accused of inciting that suicide, I mean, transpose that to the internet era. It was definitely a precursor to what we're seeing now. So I think that we all know what pirate radio is. It's interesting that radio has really been supplanted in the world by streaming services, even music. I mean, very few people, I think, there's drive time radio, whether you're getting Sirius XM and those kinds of things, but YouTube is really taken over, or podcasting or whatever. And I think the movie's just as relevant when it came out 30 years ago as it is it was just as relevant. It's just as relevant today as it was 30 years ago when it came out. It has the same lessons, and what is our responsibility, and what does it mean when you look, when I get online, you said in yourself that when you're a voice out here in the wilderness talking and people tune in every single day, like, I do feel a responsibility to the viewership. I mean, this community, the Post-Geek Singularity community, the imagination connoisseurs that you all are, I feel a responsibility for having, like I say, I threw this party, I provided a venue, and I opened the door, and it's up to you guys and girls and gentle beings and kind souls across these 28 known galaxies to show up. But my job is to throw a good party, and I don't want to turn people off. It's harder. It gets increasingly harder. I talked about that letter. I didn't read it yesterday that Evan sent in, and talked about how I had been increasingly talking about more subjects that were more on the quote unquote, talking about cancel culture and woke culture and all that. But a lot of that is just a function of there's less and less entertainment news and things that I want to talk about. And obviously the things I would talk about, like toys, let's get physical media, the discs that you're talking about now. That's why I started other shows, so I could specifically talk about those things. I love the stream like we did with Az and I did. The hot toys are fully articulated over here. I don't get to geek out like that. If I were to do a stream about my toys for 2 hours, who would show up? But, it's great. You've become a very Black Phillip. You've become a very big part of the community and a participant in many of these streams. And, I think that looking back on old films I don't think ever really lose their relevance. Look at Charlie Chaplin's The Great Dictator, which I have a letter to read about soon. It really depends. You have to take an open mind with you when you watch these things to make sure. I think all films, you can find value in most films, actually. I mean, sure, there's some genre fare and some disposable exploitation movies that maybe aren't as worth as much as other movies are, but still, you get what you get out of movies, what you take into them, and I think it's it really depends. So yes, I'm glad that you found value in these movies, and I'm sorry you've been struggling, but I'm glad you can come here. We need you, sir, and I think that's I think it's important, and I think both of these movies, it's interesting, Small Soldiers and Pump Up the Volume, two very different movies, but both movies that can resonate with you, and I think that's really important. So, yeah. Let's see here. So, Liam Kelly writes in. Liam Kelly says, "Hi, Rob. I sent this a little bit ago, but thankfully you let me know it was never sent to you. Oh, we just didn't get it. Must have been a problem on my end. Apologies, sir. I've been working on my screenplay, remember? Which I wrote to you about a few weeks ago. I remember. And what did I tell you? You were asking if you should write it. I've reached the midpoint of my film, and I believe I'm content with how my plot is shaping up. The one point of it that I'm a slight bit unhappy with is my opening. I don't know whether or not it's strong enough. I've been reading the classic screenplay novels to start out. Well, screenplay how-to books. Screenplay by Sid Field. Save the Cat by Blake Snyder. Blake Snyder was actually a friend of mine before he passed away. But I believe that getting some direct constructive criticism from you and hopefully the kind, warm members of the Post-Geek Singularity would be most helpful. Thank you very much for taking the time out of your busy schedule to read this. Enjoy. This is my own opening. Prepare for cringe. Don't go easy on me. All right, then. I said I would read it, and I'm going to read it right on this. I'm going to read this screenplay right now with all of you, and we'll be critical. I'll go through this. So, fade in. Exterior, public street, morning. Honest tranquility on twilight morning street. Street is lined with sleepy homes, zebra crossings are pedestrianless, and the traffic lights are glowing a stark red. Traffic lights turn green. Damien, 16, a tall boy wearing his school uniform and carrying his school bag, makes his way across the zebra crossing with his hand kindly on the back of a hunched-over, overweight, frail, elderly woman, leaning her own weight into her walker. As soon as the pair cross, Damien awkwardly bends down to receive a kiss on the cheek. Elderly woman is surprised, but pecks his cheek nonetheless. Elderly woman says softly, "Bye now." Okay, I have some notes. So, just as a stylistic thing. So, fade in, exterior public street morning, honest tranquility on twilight morning street. Okay, honest tranquility is a little nebulous. I mean, I get what you mean, but when you say exterior public street morning, just give me staccato, like a quiet, bucolic neighborhood street. Period. Tell me what I see. Always tell me what I see. Don't tell me how to feel. Tell me what I see. You got to give it to me visually. So when you say honest tranquility, I don't know if that means. Well, I don't quite know what. I mean, I know what it means, but I don't quite know what it means as far as what does honest tranquility mean in terms of what you see. You know, you got to just tell me what I see. If it's a public morning street, if that's where we're at, what do we see? That's all you need to tell us. I like the street is lined with sleepy homes. You don't have to say street is lined. Just write sleepy homes, wind in the trees. That's all you have to say. So exterior public street morning. Instead of street is lined with, make it punchier. You know, just say sleepy homes or freshly manicured lawns, sleepy homes, a nice place to live. Bam, something like that. Things that, you know, and when you say like a nice place to live, that's after we have the visuals. So give me like ba-bump, ba-bump, ba-bump. It's almost like music. What do we see? We see these images, ba-bump, ba-bump, ba-bump. You know, and that's all you have to say. And the traffic lights are glowing a stark red. Well, that's kind of in a strange way, because when you say traffic lights, what you mean, I understand. They're all red because there's no cars. But that can be a little... traffic lights turn green. Damien, a tall boy wearing a school uniform and carrying a school bag, makes his way across the zebra crossing. See, what you've done is you've said here zebra crossings and all that. All you have to just say is a crosswalk. Just make it simple. Keep it simple. And instead of traffic lights turn green, don't worry about that, because think about when you're setting up when you say the traffic lights are glowing a stark red, that's almost a directorial choice. And when you say the traffic lights turn green, that's also a directorial choice. All you have to say is Damien, 16, a tall boy wearing a school uniform and carrying a school bag, makes his way across a crosswalk, makes his way through the sidewalk. That's it. That's all you have to say. Period. And then you say, this sentence is, you have one sentence. Traffic lights turn green. Damien, 16, a tall boy wearing a school uniform and carrying a school bag, makes his way across the zebra crossing with his hand kindly on the back of a hunched-over, overweight, frail, elderly woman leaning her own weight into her walker. That is one sentence that you've written there. Again, punchy. Just tell me what we see. You know, Damien, 16, a tall boy wearing a school uniform, stands on the sidewalk. Period. Next to him, a kindly woman, overweight, leaning into a walker. Boom, we don't know her name. But it's got to be, quick. Just tell me what I see. And as soon as the paths cross, Damien awkwardly bends down to receive a kiss on the cheek. The elderly woman is surprised. Anyway, I won't go through this the whole way, but I'm just saying, that's what you want to do. You want to set the scene. What do we see? You got to paint the images in my mind visually. Tell me what I'm seeing. That's it. And then give me, oh, there's Damien. There's a woman. They're walking in the sidewalk. Keep it. But, you got to use those flourishes. Anyway, I'm just going to read the whole thing now. I'm going to go through. That was just something I wanted to start out with and tell you. I haven't read this before, so. Elderly woman, softly, bye now. Elderly woman turns and leaves. Damien lingers in his spot. He exhales and grimaces at the lady. Why so? Any questions raised are shut down as Damien smiles and begins to skip down the street. He skips past a disheveled, middle-aged, homeless man sitting on the pavement, holding an empty coffee cup. Damien stops skipping, hesitates, and clocks the homeless man. He dips his hand deep into his trouser pocket and whips out crinkly €5 note and a few coins. Damien reverses and drops a mere 50-cent coin in the cup. Homeless man's face still lights up. Homeless man mutters, "God bless you." Damien lingers, staring down at the homeless man for one beat too long. He shoves the note and other coins back in his pocket. Damien's eyes are furious, but his body remains still. Why? Damien then continues on walking, turning to a corner to Lincoln Street and reaching a rubbish bin. He notices some litter beside it. A 20-something-year-old businessman is on his phone beside the bin. Damien picks up the litter, and when the businessman looks up from his phone, he throws the litter in the bin. Businessman, good man yourself. Damien winks at the businessman, smiles, and uses finger guns in an attempt to be amicable. The businessman, baffled, just looks at Damien until Damien skips away from the awkward moment and shuffles over to the doorway of the next house, which has a little step at the base of the emerald green door. Damien jumps up onto the step and takes a deep breath before knocking on the door. Off-screen scuttering is heard from behind the door. Unintelligible female shouting is heard. Damien appears anxious. The door flies open. Vivian, 17, a pretty, strawberry blonde-haired girl, answers it. She stands impatiently, leaning against the open door. She is in the same uniform as Damien, but she wears a skirt. Her hair is tied up in a messy ponytail. Her anger is evident. Vivian, you're late. You're late again. Damien, if you're never on time, what kind of a friend are you then? An honest one? Honest my arse, Damien. Vivian stands back, making space for Damien to enter. Hurry on, might as well have a cuppa while we're late. Damien smiles and enters. He hovers there, smiling. See, like, Damien smiles and enters, he hovers there, smiling. Again, that's a sentence where you're using the word smiling twice in two sentences. So, Damien, will your mother mind, Vivian? Dunno, don't care. So disrespectful. She deserves better. Come on, go in. Damien turns and heads down the hallway. Vivian hastily glances in the mirror beside her, fixing her hair before shutting the door with a slam. Cut to interior, Vivian's house, kitchen, morning. Claustrophobic, smoke-filled kitchen, lit by sunshine coming through the tiny window and glass back door, both of which are so dirty that the outside is obscured. Not much room for walking around. Kitchen is packed to the brim with appliances, barely room for the lonely coffee table. Countertop is a mess, as baking equipment, covered in a doughy mixture, is thrown across it. Damien swings open the kitchen door, entering. Elaine, 56, Vivian's lanky, frail mother, sits at the coffee table. Her glasses rest on her long nose. In one hand, she holds a newspaper. In the other, she holds a lit cigarette. She wears an apron, splattered with that doughy mixture. Looking down her nose, Elaine sees Damien enter with Vivian behind him. She puts the newspaper down and jumps up to greet him. Elaine, there's my boy. Damien, your boy? Damien drops his school bag on the ground. Damien and Elaine embrace each other in a tight hug. Damien, pulling away after the hug. I like that. Vivian squeezes past the two of them, revolted. Vivian, you'd be so cute together, you know that? Damien awkwardly laughs. Vivian hits Elaine with a look that could kill, but Elaine doesn't take any notice. Well, I wouldn't want to steal your boyfriend. Ugh, he is not. I'd much rather him than those bozos Nadia and Michael. Elaine takes a puff of her cigarette. Vivian rolls her eyes and jumps up onto the countertop at the end of the kitchen. They're my friends. What do you actually have against them? They've been nothing but lovely to us. Elaine sarcastically smirks and takes a seat at the table. Stories spread through this town like the plague. You know that better than I do. What stories? Well, they're for me to know and for you to confess. Damien glances at Vivian. She meets his gaze. He's rather chirpy, but can tell that the atmosphere has become more tense. He winks at her. I'm with Vivian on this one. And there I was trusting you. Trust? You're a fool. Elaine points her finger at Vivian and slightly nods. Elaine, we can agree there, Viv. What's so foolish about trust, says Damien. Vivian picks up a mixture-covered wooden spoon and sits beside her and licks off some of the mixture. Ah, Damien, I thought you'd understand, to be honest. Well, why do you trust? So that people will trust me. Can't make friends without trust. I see. And how do you know they're on your side? You just presume? It's a mutual trust. You scratch my back, I scratch yours. I get you, yeah. How many people do you trust, would you say? Well, too many to count. Really? I trust only one person, and that's myself. Who's there when I'm down in the basement heading to bed? My mother or Viv? May care for me at my lows when she's needed, but when I'm on top of the world, who's there for me still? Who's there? Damien, you? Elaine, me. Vivian jumps down off the counter. That's how I saw right through those friends. They can't fool me. Well, I'm sorry I said anything. Vivian walks over to the kettle beside Damien and switches it on. Elaine, all right, you need to go to school now. Forget your tea. Vivian, you're right, I can't be late for Mr. Gull's English. Mr. Dull's English, more like it. All right, come on, sorry, Damien. No, it's all right. Let's head. Elaine says, don't forget your glasses. You always do. All right, yeah. Vivian rummages through some of the mess on the kitchen counter and pulls her pair of glasses, holding them up triumphantly. Elaine nods at her. Vivian puts them on. Damien leads into Elaine and gives her a tight hug. Damien, I'll see you as soon as possible. Elaine, hopefully, save me from your wand. Vivian and Damien pick up their school bags and throw them over their shoulders. They both shuffle out of the kitchen. Vivian turns around, smiles, and runs back and gives Elaine a hug. Vivian, I love you. Elaine, I love you too, Viv. Pretending that didn't happen, Vivian runs out of the kitchen. Elaine, I won't be here when you get home. Vivian shuts the door, cutting Elaine off. Elaine chuckles to herself, used to it, as she straightens out her paper to continue reading. And there you go. There's the scene. Well, Liam, first of all, congratulations on writing it. And I would say, it's what you've got here is the opening. You say it's the opening of your movie. You're introducing 3 characters, and I thought the scene is pretty good. It's a pretty good scene. Like you've got, you've got your character Damien is apparently a caring guy, but is he really? He's got his friend Viv and mother Elaine, and obviously you're showing a dynamic between the 3 of them. And they're going off, Viv and Damien are going off to school. I would just remember, I mean, I can't tell enough about where this is going or what's happening with the characters because you've only sent me a few pages. But I like this opening scene. I would just say that I would ask you, it's literally a scene where our main character is walking to his school, his chum, maybe girlfriend to be, I don't know, and meeting her and her mother. What I would ask you is this the best scene to open your movie on? Is this what you want to have happen? Or is there something that's somewhere in your story that could maybe be a better, because this opening seems fairly ordinary. And not that I'm saying a spaceship has to land and aliens have to get out, but I'm just curious as to why your story begins with this particular scene, because it seems fairly. Obviously it's a scene where we're meeting the characters for the first time, but I don't know if it's the best way to open a movie. If you catch my drift, but I did like the scene. I mean, I think just remember when you're writing, tell us, you got to be very clear, and remember you don't have to embellish too much. We know if you can say, like, Damien steps into a messy kitchen, or Damien steps in the kitchen, it's messy, and just give me quick staccato images of what do we see, because everyone understands that. You don't have to go into, like when you're saying the kitchen is filled with mixing bowls full of the last thing it was. I mean, you could do that, but give it to me quickly in more of a staccato. You don't have to use so many, as they said in Amadeus, too many notes. But yeah, it's interesting. I would say that I'm curious. I thought you did a good job with the dynamic of the 3 characters, and that's good stuff. And it's what are Viv and Elaine shouting about? You say people are scuttering around, unintelligible female shouting is heard. That's all very interesting. I like all that. What's been going on? What's going on with Viv and Elaine? Why isn't Elaine going to be there when she gets back? I don't know. We'll see. But, again, not enough to really tell I can't make a judgment, but definitely there's something here. I'm curious. I want to read more. Are you going to send more in when you are ready? Because I am interested. This one comes from James Wallace. Our friend James writes in and says, "Hi, Rob. Recently, I saw the film Nomadland, and although I didn't care for the film one bit due to the protagonist in the film, I admired the cinematography and some of the editing, and the direction for me was questionable just due to the documentary-type nature of the film. However, my point with this letter is Frances McDormand. When she won her Oscar a few years back for the movie with the signs, she mentioned inclusion writer in her Oscar speech, the movie with the signs. I was very curious when I watched Nomadland, especially since McDormand produced the film, and noticed that behind the scenes, with the exception of the director, almost everyone was white. And not only that, besides McDormand, David Strathairn, and a few other actors, it was just regular people in the film. So you have an actor that wins an Oscar mentioning inclusion writer and then only uses real people instead of actors. That's really hypocritical due to the fact that acting is also an art, just like cinematography, sound design, directing, editing, etc. As a result of claiming to try and meet the standards of the low budget for the film, which was a $4 to $6 million movie, and I've worked on films that were much lower, however, they still hired SAG and AFTRA actors at a reduced rate, of course, but those actors had an opportunity to hone their craft. Whereas with Nomadland, regular people that just probably signed on a camera waiver or got paid the very minimal amount and most likely have no ambition to pursue acting, get the screen time. Now, a couple of years later, McDormand regrets mentioning inclusion writer because she says that she didn't have enough information at the time. She just forgot her speech. What people don't seem to understand is that work in the industry and outside the industry is that hiring people of diversity is great. However, what happens is that people usually work with the same people. As noted with the director of Nomadland, she brought on her cinematographer and most likely her regular crew, and it's hard to get someone outside of the club into the group. Usually, it only happens by chance. People hire people that they've worked with before on films and movies due to the fact that there is a shorthand and they know their work ethic, and when making a low-budget film, time is not a luxury to break someone new in. When someone on a stage after winning an Oscar tells people that they need to be more inclusive, yet their film a couple of years later, where you look behind the scenes, it isn't really filled with diversity of mixed races with the exception of the director. I think that's a problem in the industry today, is that things are set on stage and then actors are not called out on it later. And I think part of the reason Frances McDormand says she regrets saying what she said with regards to the inclusion writer is because she was probably afraid someone would point out this hypocrisy in the press. Yet at this time, no one has. Instead, the press just raves about the film, and when they should take into account that SAG actors are only a small percentage and they get regular work, whereas there are thousands out there waiting in the wings to have their shot at a role and have their shot at honing their craft. To me, it would be like if the Coen brothers only used real people for Blood Simple. Then McDormand would have never got a shot at her first feature. So that's just one of the many hypocrisies of the industry where actors go up on stage again in the heat of the moment and then basically spout out something that they have no real knowledge of, and as a result, the industry or someone in it may get hurt and may not get an opportunity due to current-day rhetoric. My opinion is if you win an award, just say your thanks and get off the stage. I'm not trying to beat up on Frances McDormand. She probably realized the mistake she made at the time and it sounded like a great idea to her. But public statements have consequences if you're speaking off the cuff. Yet a few years later, it looks like she didn't follow through. What do you think, Rob? And here's a video that James has included of behind the scenes on Nomadland. So I'll put this in the live chat. There's the link. And then here is an article where Frances McDormand regrets in saying that she mentioned the inclusion writer. So, first of all, a lot to unpack here, James, but a good letter with some good points. So I want to thank you for writing in. So what James is talking about is there's now this idea of an inclusion writer where everybody wants to be more inclusive of hiring people and making sure that people of more diverse backgrounds get chances to work in Hollywood. Here's my experience, I've been on sets, Hollywood sets, working since 1989. And one of the things that I have seen on set, now I'm talking about on set, people are working in production. Production is really a microcosm of life in general, because I've talked about on the show, you have all walks, you have all people from all walks of life. You have white collar people, you have blue collar people, you have salt of the earth people, you have people that are living in ivory towers people. You have all kinds of people on a movie set that are actually working in production. Production is a very specific, specialized, it's actually a melange of very specific, specialized areas. For instance, the grip and electrical department. On a movie set, you need people that understand not only how electricity works and where it can be brought, but if you go onto a set, say you're in a barn and you want to make it look like in the barn that there's sunlight streaming through slats, you have people that have to know how to play with light, not just the cinematographer, but a cinematographer has usually his entire camera department and grip and electric that all know what they speak a shorthand, and if they want to hang certain lights here, certain lights there, and your key grips and your best boys, and they all know what they're doing. It's very specialized, and yet it's a lot of hauling around cables and crawling up to places and hanging lights using duct tape or clamps or all kinds of things. Now, and then you've also got the producers that are on set, representing the money, perhaps, and there's the actors, and then there's the hair and the makeup people who are hair and makeup people, but they also are great psychologists and psychiatrists because they have to listen to their charges, their actors, and make them look good. And they hear whatever was going on in the actors' lives. They hear all that, and they have to be supportive, and they have to be helpful. I mean, a movie set is a very interesting place. And like James pointed out, it's not really a place where people get to, you're not bringing in a lot of new people. Simply because people that are working on film sets, that are actually working in production, are almost like, think of them as an elite military force. These are people that understand their jobs. And when you're working in production, you're basically storming the beach at Normandy every day. I mean, making war analogies, going to war while no one's dying and no one's shooting at you. Making a movie is similar in that you have logistical, especially if you're on location. When you're on location, sometimes I've literally been on the beach, film locations that are on the beach. You are literally storming the beach with personnel and equipment. And you have your objective is to shoot how many pages you have to shoot. And you have to get all the equipment and all the manpower onto the beach, shoot what you need to shoot, and then get off the beach. So in that arena, while it's nice I think everybody, for the most part, means well. And I think wanting to hire more diverse people is an admirable goal. But like with any highly specialized endeavor, you need people that know their jobs. And when it comes right down to it, like, look, my first experience on a movie set, I'd never worked on a movie set before. Never. And I was hired as the art department production assistant. That is as entry level as they come, although an office assistant, being in the production office, would be more entry level than me. I was given a lot of interesting things to do. And so, my first day on the job, I was handed $10,000 in cash and a list. And they said, okay, just go back, keep receipts, don't come back till you have everything on the list. That was my first day on the job. It was trial by fire. I got dropped in there. And I will say this, and I was telling somebody this earlier, I was talking to Kevin Rubio earlier, in all the times that I've been on movie sets, and they've been pretty diverse places. They've been pretty diverse places in terms of different kinds of people. You meet people from all walks of life, really, on movie sets. There's a certain mindset and a certain way of being to work on a film set. It's not exactly a place where you need people that need a lot of hand-holding. You have people that are very skilled, they're very technically minded, they understand how movie sets work, and it's not the kind of thing that you can make. You can't go work on a film set in an entry-level position. Now, as an art department production assistant, I was being utilized before we got on the set. Our work was usually done, the art department's job was done, and then they could go on what we had made, and then they filmed there. But I think the idea of an inclusion rider is a meaning that you're going to hire more diverse people is a great idea. But like anything else, in practice, you need to find people. If you want to have an inclusion, if you want to have be more inclusive of who you're hiring, you have to find people that know what they're doing. At the end of the day, movie making, unfortunately, especially from the production end of it, is there's too much money involved. You can't hire people that are new at their jobs. You have to hire people that really know what they're doing, because literally every second on a movie set costs money. Every second. And if you hire somebody that doesn't know their job, they're costing you money. So you can't. And it is a really difficult place to get into. And like James pointed out, you get hired to go from show to show to show by the people that have already worked with you and know what you're doing. Because one of the great things about working on a movie set is it's just as social as it is. The skill part of your skill set is to be a delightful human being. You have to be a nice person. If people don't like working with you, you won't get hired again. So you have to be somebody who has decent social skills, you're easy to get along with, and you're good at your job. Not easy things to find, and you also have to be a team player. You have to be able to hold your emotions in check. There's going to be enough people that are going to go crazy on a movie set. They don't need you. It's a tough, very, very interesting thing. And I think in the case of, I think what Frances McDormand said, her heart's in the right place. And I think, yes, we want more people of all walks of life to be able to, all shapes, sizes, colors, and creeds, to work in the entertainment business. Unfortunately, the reality of the business is it is a meritocracy. If you're not good at your job, you're gone. It doesn't matter what color you are. You have to be good at your job. And I'll tell you this, in the 32 years I've worked in movies now, I have never seen on a movie set, I have never seen anybody be discriminated against if you're good at your job. All people care about is, are you good at your job, and do I like being around you? That's it. That's all that matters. Nobody really cares in production. You got to be good at your job, and you have to be pleasant to be around. And if you're unpleasant to be around, then you have to make up for that with just how good you are. And that's pretty much it. I haven't seen a lot of, because people who work in production, they're people that are, it's a very specific kind of a person. I would describe it as, you're like carnies, or you might be part of a nomadic caravan like Nomadland was actually about. So it's and people who work in films, especially in production, you also have different kinds of political views. There are Republicans and Democrats on movie sets, libertarians, communists. There's all kinds of people that work on movie sets. But again, I think people who work on movie sets are a little bit more open-minded than, say, other jobs, because you're not just talking about artists, but you're talking about people that are they're just different. They're different kinds of people. And I've seen a lot of, in my experience, there's been a lot of diversity amongst crews, but also in terms of like Nomadland, I think in a way, Frances McDormand, by agreeing to be in a film that was obviously budgetarily challenged, she was bringing light the fact that they were using non-actors. You could say that, okay, there's a lot of movies that need obviously more SAG actors, and why are they using real people when they could be using SAG actors? And I would say that the whole point of Nomadland is that this real milieu was what they were documenting. And I think that there is something to be said for that. And I think Nomadland is a unique project for that reason. I don't necessarily think Frances McDormand is a hypocrite, because remember, she signed on to Chloe Zhao's vision. And Chloe Zhao, as a storyteller and a director, she wants to tell the story that she wants to tell. And that's, as the architect of Nomadland, that's what she was interested in doing. And basically, it's like, do you sign on to that vision? And should Chloe Zhao's vision, I know it's not pronounced Zhao, it's the Chinese word, it's pronounced differently, but I wish I could, Willa help me out here. But it's her film. And so I don't think, you get to a place where a movie like Nomadland might not be the best example of this because they did film in these real places with real people. But I do understand what you're saying. I just think that we should all be more mindful of there's a lot of people that don't get a leg up, don't get an opportunity. But on the other hand, the problem with Hollywood is that there's too much money involved. It's not a charity, and it's not a cut your teeth, It's unfortunate. The bigger the studio production, the more money's at stake, so the harder it is to hire new people. And again, I've met a lot of people that don't want to be a PA. Like, I knew 30 years ago when I was first starting out in the industry, when I was a kid, I knew that I would be getting coffee for people. I figured for like 3 years. And I resolved myself to that. I was going to get a PA's wages, which is not a lot of money. I knew that's where I was going to be. And I was cool with that. I think it's harder to find people who want to be cool with that. But then again, you shut up and you watch and you look and you learn. And I'll tell you something. When I worked on Leatherface, Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3, which was the first movie I worked on, and that was with Viggo Mortensen and Ken Foray, and I mean, it was I learned a lot. Kate Hodge, Bill Butler. It was a huge learning experience for me, and I wouldn't have traded it for the world. But again, I don't know if she's necessarily being hypocritical. I think she really would like to see more diverse people hired, but that particular movie was, I think, a difficult one. Muggle Born writes in and says, "Hello, Rob. In your last few episodes of Robservations, you've talked about how terrible it is to ban historic content of any kind. I, for the most part, agree with you. However, when faced with something in my own life, I handled this outcome differently, and I'll explain. My grandmother died a few years ago, and when I announced I was having a child with my partner, we were flooded by historical books from my late grandma's collection. One book in particular I found to be extremely foul. It was a picture book that depicted one old folk story, most likely gathered from slaves on a plantation. This picture book showcased a black woman, heavily cartoonified, with big pouting lips and a large butt. It reminded me of older Looney Tunes cartoons, and it made me feel ill. That wasn't all. The story itself was about her stupid boy, yes, he called his own son stupid, and various misguided activities he got himself into while his mama was busy. In one instance, the young boy grabbed this little dog by the tail and nearly dipped the poor creature into this hot, boiling yellow substance. It might have been hot butter. Sadly, I was flipping the pages too fast to recall. This book depicted too many ill things for me to warrant keeping it. Child abuse, too. She was seen spanking her child and hitting him hard on the head. So despite it being historical as well as once belonging to my grandmother, who I love deeply, I don't want my child exposed to this content. I thought about how I should handle this situation, and I ended up wrapping the book in a paper bag and tossing it into the recycle bin. I didn't even want to be seen with such a book at a used bookstore, so I felt it was my best option. It is with the recycling crew to do with it as they wish. It's officially out of my hands. For me, it depends on the content of these older works. This book really didn't offer up really anything of value, in my opinion, and I hope you, Rob, will consider reading my letter on your show, because it's important to have a range of voices and thoughts on such matters. Longtime fan of you. I've been watching you since you had a brief moment where you fed your cute doggos treats a while ago. They will be back, by the way. Keep up the good work, and even if we have various opinions, I admire what you do and your new film and short story contests and the Post-Geek family. Respectfully, Muggle Born. Well, first of all, Muggle, you bring up a great point, and something that is so distasteful. Why not just get rid of it? Listen, I don't disagree with what you did. I don't. And that was a choice that you made for yourself, which I'm all for. I think individuals should be able to make choices about what works and what doesn't work for them. And if you find that you are in possession of offensive material, I think for yourself, you should do whatever you think is correct for you and your family. I am wholeheartedly in agreement with you. I think where I get nervous and where the things that give me pause is that when it becomes up to somebody else to make those decisions for you. Now, I was taken to task. Somebody said in one of the comments that, Rob, you say one thing, but then you offer other alternative points of view. It's like you're trying to have it both ways. And I'm like, no, I think my position on censorship is pretty clear. I don't believe in it. I don't believe in censorship, and I certainly don't believe in trying to wash away our less than, let's say, reputable history. I don't believe that at all. But however, this was your grandmother's book. It's not like all of the copies of that book are being burned. And I would say this, as I'm reading this story, I don't know what kind of a book it was, but I think a book like that should be then utilized and contextualized and say, look, this is what people thought. I don't know if it was 100 years old. Let's say 100 years old, 150 years old. This book was printed 150 years ago, and here's where we were at. Let's not be at this place anymore. Let's not do this. And here's what's problematic about it and why. Contextualize it and explain the problems that we have with it. But don't, in your case, I understand. You don't want it, but it's not like you were going and getting all of those books, and nor were you calling for all those books to be gotten rid of. You got rid of it for yourself because it made you uncomfortable, and I don't have a problem with that at all. I think that everybody, that's one of the great things about being Americans, is that we can make those decisions in our own families about what, and for ourselves, what we believe to be right and wrong. And we should be able to bring up our children the way we see fit, even if the way we see fit might not be the same way that somebody else sees fit. That's one of the great things about America. What I see happening that scares me is that on a grand scale, we now have other people that are basically telling others what they should and shouldn't do, what they can and can't see. And I think that's antithetical to this country. And also, they're doing it based on the fashion, what's going on right now. I mean, I've seen in my lifetime, as I talked about the other day, the PMRC, the Parents Music Resource Center, about banning music. Darling Nikki, Prince's Darling Nikki was something. Oh my God! Darling Nikki, she was masturbating with the magazine. Oh my God! Well, I would say, I've never used a magazine that way. I've used a magazine for in different ways, but it really depends. I mean, to sit there and what I don't like is especially like this idea that if a song conveys the idea of masturbation, like Prince's Darling Nikki off Purple Rain does, that's somehow something that we can't talk about. That why not? Everybody does that, I think very few people in the world have ever been born that don't masturbate, starting from a very young age, not knowing what we're doing. But it's bizarre to me that people want to get rid of things that are part of human nature and pretend that they're not real. I find that to be distressing. So I don't think what you did is wrong. And I think that if you found something that's that offensive and from a historical standpoint, not really a good thing to have around, by all means, I have no problem with you getting rid of it. But if you decided that you thought that this book should be disappeared from humanity forever, in perpetuity throughout the universe, then I would have a problem with it. Because ultimately, I think I've never seen this book, but you writing in and telling me why you didn't like it, that's important. I need to learn that, and I think others need to learn that, and that's why we need to share the experiences. That's why I think having more voices of people that have been traditionally marginalized, minority voices, black voices, why is it important to hear from those voices? The Black Lives Matter movement, I think in a way, the important thing about it is to hear the experiences of what people go through on a daily basis. The idea that, like, as a white dude growing up in an upper middle class environment, as I've said before on the show, I don't even know what it's like to have to worry. If I get pulled over by a cop, I don't worry. If I walk into a convenience store at 2 o'clock in the morning to get a tube of toothpaste, I don't worry. But what's it like? There's people that do. Every single time you have a confrontation or any kind of interaction with a police officer, it could end with somebody getting shot. I mean, these are experiences that need to be discussed and understood and talked about. And that's why I think hearing voices and talking and getting these things out in the open is where we're at. And I think, like you just said, like in the letter you wrote to me, I think it's important that you wrote that letter, and it makes sense. And I'm all for it. And I think this is exactly what this show is all about. You can write a letter in to me. I can read it. I can offer my opinion. We can have an exchange of ideas and hopefully learn something and realize that we're a lot more similar than we are different. So, yeah, I think what you did was exactly the right thing to do. And let's see. Here, this is interesting. Anthony M. Johnson writes in and says, "To the Duke of Dope Discourse, Robert Meyer Burnett. There are 1,000 ways to start a letter, but I shall settle for simply expressing my gratitude for the entertainment and, as the title suggests, the thoughtful discourse that you provide. I followed John Campion's great channel for the past few years, and while I must confess that you're my favorite guest that appears on his show, it was only recently that I actually thought to take a look at your channel." Why was that, by the way? "I do not have much free time in my schedule." Oh. "But when YouTube suggested I watch your short take titled The Challenges of Loving Sci-Fi and Fantasy and Mormonism, I knew I had to take a break and watch, given that I myself am a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. I greatly enjoyed the commentary that you provided and was gladdened to find that you treated another member of my faith with a degree of respect that I don't often find in this oddly hostile world of ours. This clip led me into watching the next video that was left on autoplay, and after having my own soul moved and crushed by Alexander's thoughtful letter regarding Maria," I know, right? "I was hooked, and I've been watching Robservations ever since. Given how much enjoyment I derive from your program, I thought it only fair that I contribute with a letter of my own. The past few months have been an equally exciting and tumultuous time for the film community, but no cinematic idol draws my attention more than the coming Zack Snyder cut of Justice League. This has generated a fair number of great letters from viewers, including a few that are quite negative when it comes to Snyder's portrayal of Superman. For me, not only is Henry Cavill's turn in the red cape an excellent depiction, but, though blasphemous as it may be for many, the best version of Superman I've seen. Superman has long been connected to a variety of religious and mythological characters, and many suggesting that he's an allegory for the revered prophet Moses. Just as Moses was jettisoned at birth so that he might escape the destruction that would befall his people, and many who obsess over the meaning of names are quick to point out that even his name, Kal-El, resembles the Hebrew for voice of God. At the very least, the Nazis thought that Superman was a Judaic figure, so much so that the German government tried to censor and prohibit the distribution of Superman comics in the early 1940s. So that had just as much to do with anti-Semitic propaganda as it did with anti-American distrust. However, when the Jewish creators may or may not have intended while the Jewish creators may or may not have intended for Superman to be a Moses stand-in, the general criticism split on that controversial take. I myself never paid much mind because it would be an illusion without a purpose. One can be reverential to major figures, historical or otherwise, but an illusion is only useful if it provides context, commentary, or some other form of insight into the character, and that which they've become a stand-in for. In fact, the reason why I never much cared for Superman growing up is because he didn't seem to provide much commentary at all. He may have been the Superman, the epitome of what our species could hope to become, but since my ideal of what man should be like is Jesus Christ, I paid more attention to the man who bore a scarlet robe than the man who bore a scarlet cape. That all changed with the advent of Man of Steel back in 2013. I'd seen several of Zack Snyder's films beforehand, and being just on the cusp of adulthood, did not think much of them at the time. I found the color grading of his films bizarre, his characters dull, and even his action work inferior to the likes of the Marvel films that I was obsessed with at the time and held as the gold standard that all cinema should be held to. A take that makes my modern sensibilities recoil in disappointment at my past self. Oh, come on now. When I went to see Man of Steel, it was more out of a sense of boredom than any true desire to see yet another take on what I considered to be one of comic book fandom's dullest icons. Instead, the film was a revelation, and even just one showing was enough for it to become not just one of my favorite superhero films of all time, but one of my favorite films of all time. Zack Snyder fixed Man of Steel for me, and he did it by making this telling of the heir of the House of El a modern reinterpretation of the tale of the Son of God, Jesus Christ. I had heard from a few evangelical friends shortly before the film's release that Warner Brothers had been strangely sending out flyers and other marketing materials to Christian churches advertising Man of Steel. As the perfect film to take their congregations to. The allusions were readily apparent. Just as Christ was born of an unnatural birth, the Immaculate Conception to his mother, Mary, Kal-El was Krypton's firstborn. I was doing Marlon Brando, Krypton's firstborn son in several centuries. Clark Kent was adopted and raised by a father who would instruct the boy in the ways of becoming a man. Though just as Joseph perished before the Savior reached his full maturity, so too did Jonathan die before the annunciation of his adoptive son. Christ's ministry began with a 40-day fast and seclusion in the wilderness, where he was instructed as to the true nature of who he was and his mission upon this earth, just as Clark had to wander in the wilderness before he could discover that he was no mere mortal man, but the hopes and dreams of a higher place than earth. Even the age of Superman is deliberate, for just as Christ concluded his ministry and reached his maturity when he was 33, Man of Steel took the time to point out that Clark Kent became the heroic Boy Scout at the same age. As I mentioned before, references are all well and good, but they are little more than window dressing if they don't actually do anything beyond just serve to be an inside joke or fan service for the studious watcher. As I've studied films for what they are and grown to appreciate their myriad of complicated, interconnected aspects far beyond just whether I was entertained or not, I've grown to like Zack Snyder's masterpiece more and more. However, when I had just finished watching Man of Steel for the first time, I recognized that it was a masterpiece because it did the one thing now I appreciate in truly great works of art. It made me think differently. It made me re-examine my worldviews. It made me question what I previously thought to be true, and acted as a true, fervent revelation for my mind. While I wish that more Christians would share their talents and make art, if only to even out the balance of power where I feel secularism dominates the mass entertainment industry, I will be the first to testify that the vast majority of so-called religious literature and film is flat-out garbage. Sacramental bread that has been left out to soak up holy water for the past 3 days sounds more appetizing to consume than the typical empty catechism dressed up as mass-market entertainment. C.S. Lewis is often attributed with the quote of, "The world does not need more Christian literature. What it needs is more Christians writing good literature." Heaven knows we do. Because if I have to see one more idiotic rendition of God is Not Dead, I will make the argument before Washington itself that perhaps crucifixion is the appropriate response to the actions of certain disappointing works of art. Hyperbole aside, the crux of my letter is that Man of Steel works for me because, at its core, it is a rumination on the nature of Jesus Christ. Many of the depictions of the Savior is of a happy-go-lucky hippie who, despite processing all the power in the universe, is content to just preach of happiness, of the world to come, and is more likely to down a keg at the next party he's invited to entertain at than preach to a congregation of eager disciples at matters of eternal weight. To me, such a figure would seem to be stoic, to be considerate, to be careful and cautious and even withdrawn or depressed by many of those around him. If the weight of the world is on your shoulders, would it not be natural for such a man to be reticent and distinct from those he was meant to save? This is the nature of Kal-El, Clark Kent, and Superman in Man of Steel. This is the nature of Jehovah, Yeshua, and Jesus Christ as I have come to perceive him due to the aid of Man of Steel. Wow. I do not think that Zack Snyder is a perfect filmmaker, but I will happily profess that he is damn near one of my favorites for this and this alone. For making me rethink my own personal understanding of the Savior, whose hands I have placed the totality of my very existence in. Few films could do such a feat, but Man of Steel was one of them. While I understand many of the qualms and complaints directed toward the film, and I agree with many of the criticisms posed by the greater Robservations community, I thought I would try and provide a unique perspective as to why, and few of my friends who have come to accept my proselytization into the fandom of the whimsically named Lord Zack Snyder. I imagine I have probably bored, offended, or even enraged a few of your listeners with this act of confession. But I am very grateful if you've taken the time to read this all the same. Whatever comes of this letter, I hope that I have at least stirred something in your heart, Rob, and that of your audience, whether it be vehemence at my fervor or laughter at the personal observation. Perhaps I will write again on a different subject, sans the religious allusions I have made, if that would be more to the audience's taste. Or perhaps I will discuss the increased religiosity of Batman v Superman, or why it was appropriate that Justice League, dealing with the second coming of Superman and the dawning of the apocalypse, a religiously loaded term in its own right, should be transfixed with the end of the world. With that all said, I do wish to close with one more analysis, and that is one of the most controversial scenes in Man of Steel. Before Clark Kent feels he must leave home and wander the world, they find themselves crossing paths with a tornado where Jonathan Kent, infamously, does not permit his adoptive son to rescue him. Jonathan Kent dies despite his son having the power to save him, a scene that is in stark contrast to the series of Christopher Reeve Superman films where he passes away due to a heart attack. The testament of the Christopher Reeves films is that Superman is a superpowered being, but he is one that cannot save everyone despite his powers, with the death of Jonathan Kent. In Zack Snyder's take on the character Superman, he's a being that has the power to save everyone, but sometimes chose not to, despite his powers. The former take makes Superman just another hero with a good heart, limited by his own inability. The latter makes Superman an intriguing figure worthy of study and awe, someone who we mere mortals can never totally understand in this life, as long as we ourselves are feeble and imperfect humans. I have spent my whole life trying to understand the nature of Jesus Christ, and, with his excellent series of films, will probably have to spend just as much time if I truly want to understand the core of what makes Zack Snyder's take on the character tick. Given that Snyder's take on Superman elicits similar emotional reverence and disgust in those who wish to study the character as the average passerby's reaction when you mention Jesus Christ, I think that Zack Snyder has crafted a work that has achieved the highest goal in art, which is to invoke study and criticism to the same degree as the famous mythological and religious stories of old. I hope my fellow imagination connoisseurs have enjoyed this letter from one film fan to another, Anthony M. Johnson. Anthony, I am not a religious man, but I have met very many religious people in my life, and I've very much appreciated their points of view. And once again, you, sir, in this letter have expressed exactly why. Like Man of Steel opened your mind in terms of how an interpretation of Superman could lead you back to your own belief in Christ and what Christ means to you, I think your letter did the best kind of thing that a letter could do, which is maybe, at least certainly for me at least, give me food for thought. And I very much appreciate that, and I would invite you, sir, to write whenever you want on whatever subject into this show, because I will be happy to continue to read letters such as yours. So I thank you for that. Because one of the things that I've never understood is just because I'm not a religious person doesn't mean I can't respect and value the feelings and thoughts and unique perspective of people that are, in fact, religious. And I have never feared, as a matter of fact, I read C.S. Lewis's Mere Christianity and the Screwtape Letters. And I think that, again, I can't imagine not reading those books. My dear Wormwood, I loved those books. I think C.S. Lewis writing about Christianity in Mere Christianity was one of the more accessible books on a religious subject, on religious topics that I've ever read. And I think that it makes me a better person having read those books, whether or not whether I'm a believer, whether I walk with the Lord or not. I still think that they were very much worthy of reading, and I very much appreciate your perspective. So thank you, sir. Much obliged. This one comes from Christopher McCulloch. Christopher McCulloch, who's written a number of letters in the past, and I always like his letters. This one's a good one. Mr. Burnett, I open this letter with a question. Do lightsabers cast light? A recent letter on the concept of headcanon, of course, put me in the mind of my youthful perch as an amateur Star Wars guru. Poring over the texts, largely alone, I would notice things, and from there extrapolate great and wondrous truths about the universe. I wasn't aware until fairly recently of the term headcanon, but I quickly recognized it to be this process. I adore lightsabers. They typify the magic of the Star Wars universe. Their existence is an in-universe anachronism. Their potence as a weapon comes not just from their ability to slice through anything, but from the skill of the user. They are the difference between combat as skill and combat as mass-produced slaughter. And fixated so, as a lad, I noticed something about them. They give off no light. Luke in the cave, Vader in the carbonite chamber, even the Emperor on his throne. None are illuminated by the weapons wielded. Well, I noticed, and from there extrapolated one of those truths. You're freaking me out, man. I've never even thought about this, just so you know, and you are right. All the more magical, a beam of light that sheds none. I added to my canon. Do lightsabers cast light? No. Even then, I knew a thing or two about the special effects at play in the Star Wars universe. I knew there were two ways to answer the question of why a lightsaber didn't shed light. The first way treats Star Wars as a story. The events that take place in those films are part of the narrative. They all add to the canon. Lightsabers are seen not to shed light, so that's something we know about lightsabers. The second way treats Star Wars as film. Film tells stories, but are not stories. The lightsaber effect was added in after the fact. On set, a lightsaber was likely a wooden stick that frame by frame ILM would add the telltale white core and colored edge to. Both these answers are wondrous things for different reasons, but only one is part of Star Wars canon. There were at least a few times in the EU that Luke improvises a light source with his saber. Possibly even in Splinter of the Mind's Eye, the very first work of the EU, but to me this went against canon. But already we see a bifurcation. Whether the EU did, and for better and worse, it tried to do everything, they were never canon, existing in the spaces that the films left open. This was a freeing experience for me. I could enjoy them all the more without having to fret over everything I personally found distracted from the magic of the films. Films they could never contradict. So, do lightsabers cast light? No. Or do they? And then came Attack of the Clones, topped off by a climactic duel between Dooku and Anakin, with melodramatic close-ups of each of their faces, moodily flashing red and blue from the clashing blades. Wait, do lightsabers cast light? Yes. I realize what a minuscule thing this is, perhaps even a certain type of minutia. But what can I say? As a young teen, this is what would disquiet me in the wee hours. If lightsabers give off light now, well then, it's all bullshit. Sabers not doing so in the original movies wasn't part of their otherworldly magic. It was just a cheap effect. This and things like it in the prequels are, I believe, what created the more recent definition of headcanon. Before, it was our attempts to map out the rules of a universe from the glimpses available to us from the three films. Now it was our willful ignorance of contradictory information. Sadly, delusion is not a permanent answer. As much as I dislike the prequels, or how disappointed I am in the sequels that they are the story of Star Wars, no time warp, retcon, or Luke show recontextualizing the events of The Last Jedi will change that. Right, pardon me. No time warp, retcon, or Luke showing up recontextualizing the events of The Last Jedi will change that. Should Disney, in their infinite wisdom, decide one day to have a Marvel Star Wars crossover, it would be canon. I chose lightsabers as my example because, while it might have carried a lot of weight with me personally, it is one of the lesser contradictions made, a change that even makes them more filmic. But there are many, many more. Most are nerd in-jokes. Parsec, anyone? Some have catastrophic ramifications on the logical cohesion of the universe. Every universe's starships have a design ethos. For Star Wars, it's ramshackle at the bottom and massive and brutalistic at the top. Star Destroyers are gargantuan vessels that operate as both a weapons platform and a fighter carrier. This makes sense. Warfare in Star Wars takes its cue from World War II naval engagements, and from man-o-war until battleship, every iteration of war vessel was trying to be bigger and have more guns, and this impetus is clearly mirrored in the Star Wars universe. But wait, what was that thing that happened in The Last Jedi? Right? Hyperdrives, shown to be available at every level of starships, are now cheap and easy mass drivers. Would your civilization be making bigger and bigger ships if a few X-Wing-sized hyperdrive-fitted torpedoes would clear the table? Rogue One cleared up the exhaust vent plot hole, but little did we know the real plot hole was the Death Star itself. And Broom Boy. Everyone in Star Wars feels the Force. I have a bad feeling about this. But only a few have been shown capable of learning to wield it as the Jedi do. Now both Rey and this nameless child have been shown to transcend this elevated plane. Immaculate apotheosis. But let's think about this for a moment. If this is possible, then the history of the universe would surely have played out a lot differently. It should be a tapestry of divine monarchies whose magic bloodlines give them powers. We've already learned the Force is immoral, the dark side now a natural part of it, and so the people who wield it will be the same. Is this Disney's way of making sure conflict never ends in their cash cow? No matter what, good will never prevail. In fact, balance means accepting evil. Is that nihilistic, or am I just exhausted already? I've said before that Star Wars suffers under a legitimacy crisis, and I think these two issues are related. That far-fetched Marvel Star Wars scenario, for instance, if Disney did decide to do a crossover but stated up front it wasn't canon, do they have the authority among the fandom to make that kind of proclamation? None of it is real, so how seriously can someone take a corporate entity saying that the two things they've made, one is less real than the other? I think George Lucas, even at his lowest point, by virtue of his status as creator, could get away with something like this, but since the sale, who can claim that kind of legitimacy? In the interregnum between the sale and Force Awakens, a lot of people saw in Disney an opportunity to reinforce the continuity that had frayed since the prequels, but now after the sequels, I think this legitimacy issue has only deepened. It might be difficult for them to say something isn't canon, but for some people, their ability to decide what is canon is in question. For some, ignorance is bliss, an interesting conundrum. What is and isn't canon is really the only preoccupation of a certain type of person. Most people will take these stories as they come, but when things like this create clear contradictions, is it any wonder how divisive a movie becomes? Despite what you might think from this letter, I have a pretty high threshold for these things. Happily will I go with something because I enjoy working out the kinks and continuity on my own time. I even enjoy when other people do the same, such as in the EU. But there comes a point when headcanon goes from working out the kinks to active denial of reality. I'm not sure what the proper mix between maintaining continuity and changing things to make them better is, or how, as a fan, to properly gauge when something has been changed to make a better story, or change just to make them their own, something I sometimes view Disney as doing. What's your take on this, Rob? And do lightsabers cast light? Christopher, how many lightsabers do you see? What a great letter this is. My God. Well, Christopher, welcome to my living hell of being a Star Trek fan in the age of since Star Trek 09. You bring up so many interesting questions. First of all, let me answer my question. Let me answer your question. Do lightsabers cast light? Yes, they do. And I understand that when they were making Star Wars and Empire and all that, they did not use a practical light source. Like normally, when you would make a movie like that now, you'd have somebody holding a light, like off screen, and flashing at the appropriate moments, like the color of the light. You would have interactive light that would help you sell the illusion. I think one of the things in Star Wars was when they were doing that in the first place, they didn't quite know what it was going to look like. So here's the thing that I think in terms of headcanon, I've always excused production errors as not being canonical. So, and I think anybody that does try and make sense of canonical errors because of production issues, I'm looking at you, Michael Chabon, and you deciding that that one moment where Spock smiled in the cage, which you also saw in the menagerie, you wanted to base the entire characterization of Spock around that one moment. Bad, Michael Chabon. Bad Pulitzer Prize winner. Bad, bad, bad. I would say the same is true of Star Wars. Yes, lightsabers cast light. The fact that they didn't cast light, they don't have, it was purely from a production standpoint. We all live in the real world. When you ignite something like a lightsaber and it's green, it's going to cast light. It is. The fact that it didn't in the movies, you must overlook that. And to make that, I love that that became a fulcrum for this whole article. But in my mind, I would say that they do. That they do, because practically that's how light works. Now, in Star Wars, I know how those were done. And so at the time, they didn't use interactive light. I would chalk that up to they were supposed to cast light. Just like in War of the Worlds, my beloved 1953 Byron Haskin directed War of the Worlds. For my entire life, I've been watching the Martian war machines rise out of the gully, and you can see, especially on DVD and Laserdisc, you can see the wires, the many, 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 many wires used to hoist the Martian war machines up out of the gully. That was a production issue. They didn't have the kind of blue screen photography they needed, or they couldn't make it work. However, when it was remastered in 2018, they digitally removed all of those wires. Now, in my mind, those wires were never really there anyway. It was supposed to be, and I think the filmmakers in 1953 would have gotten rid of those wires if they could have. I feel the same way about lightsabers not casting light. So to me, that is not a canonical issue. Lightsabers always casted light. At least that's the way I see it. But I understand what you're saying. The problem is, and I feel that this is hugely problematic with, say, the people that have taken over Star Trek, they have thrown out all of that continuity because they don't think about it. They needed more people like you, Christopher, because the people that are, they don't even understand why. Like the idea to me that the Guardian of Forever was literally part of ruins from a long dead civilization. But they decided, nope, we're going to go back to the original conception Harlan Ellison had of the Guardian and make it ambulatory. And I'm like, why are you doing that? Why are you going back and wantonly changing something to make it your own? I don't like that. And I think that's what you're discussing. And I don't understand why that happens in so many different franchises, but Star Trek and Star Wars being the biggest ones. You know, it used to be that people that were writing the EU or people that were writing Star Trek novels would take the contradictions and figure out really interesting ways to make them work. You know, I mean, people always say, why and where no man has gone before, the very first episode of Star Trek with Captain Kirk. Why is it that Gary Mitchell puts James R. Kirk on the tombstone that he makes? Doesn't he know that Kirk's middle name is Tiberius? Well, at the time, probably not. So they put James R. Kirk on the tombstone. Well, in my mind, Gary Mitchell just made a mistake. That's it. You know, we look at it and obsess over, well, oh my God, his middle initial is wrong. Is that a continuity error? I'm like, no, the guy made a mistake. You know, we make mistakes. People make mistakes. And when you've been turning into a god, you make a mistake. You make a mistake. That's what happens. That's what happened to Gary Mitchell. He made a mistake. There's no reason to then incorporate that mistake into canon. You know, it's. I mean, I guess you could, but then you say he made a mistake. Done. Finished. There you go. What a great letter, though. Let me go back and see where we're at. Where is anybody? I don't know. I'm going to switch over to. to all of that, and we're going to see. And let me figure out where we are at, so I can get back to all of your questions. Here we go. Here's what you guys are saying. James Henson says, you've mentioned George Feltenstein of the Warner Brothers Archives. Any chance you could get him on for an interview? The two of you talking would be an incredible 2 hours. You know what? I really want to. I think I'll reach out to him. I'm going to tell him I'll get him to come on the show because I'll tell him the first time I met him and he won't remember, but he'll be like, I mean, he might remember. He might not remember me personally, but he'll remember where we met, him being there. So, yeah. Skywalker Zarel says, hi, Sir RMB. Congratulations on the film and for the win. Thank you so much for reading out my letter and being so kind. I'm sending you these tips to reimburse you for feeling the need to read out that whole prologue. Put the link in the chat and then buy it, you poor man. I only included it for proof that your influence on me and how spooky it was to arrive on that week, and it didn't seem that long in print form. Again, I'm sorry. What I should have done was just include the bit that included you. So here it is. I want her story to have still the verisimilitude it deserves. Yeah, that's right. Verisimilitude. Lads from Talk's Teeth can also be educated at Oxford. Well, once in a blue moon. Bless you, good night, R&B, and 1,000 apologies, good sir. You don't have to apologize. What Skywalker is referring to is he sent me the introduction to his story that went on for a very long time, and I was like, it's hard because I didn't realize that it was there, so I wasn't even doing my best job reading it. I'd love to read a book on tape or something, but I've never done that before, but I'd have to know what it was. So our man Calvin, the father, Calvin Bowes, who's the father of Braxton, a newly minted 6-year-old, says, Braxton asks why on the remastered Star Trek, the original series, is Kirk's space, the final frontier, quieter on the ones not remastered. You can hardly hear him in the remastered ones. You know what? Probably, I'll tell you why. Probably because you're listening to a stereo mix where before the original Star Trek was mono. So the sound mix is totally different on the remastered versions. So that's why. And if you listen to it in a properly calibrated surround sound system, it won't sound the volume will be fine. Chloe says, you wake up in your youth into one of the two movies here. You have to survive the night. The two movie choices are The Warriors or Judgment Night. Are you going to be a warrior or are you going to be a person in Judgment Night? Choose wisely. Well, listen, I'll tell you, Chloe, I've seen The Warriors probably 100 times. I know the movie like the back of my hand. And for that reason alone, I'm going to take The Warriors. I'm going to take The Warriors because I know all those guys, and I would know how to survive that night. With Judgment Night, I'd probably get killed. Although I did see Judgment Night when it opened. Opening day. Actually, I went to a preview screening. I like Judgment Night. Yeah. Roger Haynes sent in a super chat. Thanks, Roger. I appreciate that. One day you're gonna ask a question, though, Roger. I know you will. Chloe says, how cool would this be if Al Pacino showed up in the last scene of WandaVision as Mephisto, taking Agatha down to hell, Al Pacino style? I think, you know what? I think if that were to happen, I think all three would leave together. Pacino would leave with Agatha and Scarlet Witch to begin the training. Justin Jorgensen says, urgent Rob, go to the Spider-Man No Way Home Twitter and look at Twitter's tweet they replied to and see what Twitter replied with. They may have just confirmed Toby and Andrew. I wouldn't be surprised if that is the case, because after all, we are getting the end of WandaVision tonight at midnight. It'll be interesting to see where it all goes. Willow says, I managed to catch Tango Shalom last night after work. Not to give away spoilers, but for a moment there near the end, I thought there was going to be a La La Land Moonlight type fiasco. Laugh out loud. I know, right? Hopefully we dragged it out to the point where you felt something there. That was tough. That whole dance sequence. I'm particularly proud of that whole dance sequence for a number of reasons. The whole end of the movie, spoiler alert, the climax. It was a lot of work that took a long time to get to where we were. David Hart sends in a super chat and says, "Hey, Rob, I just watched Hot Toys and heard you mention sending in pictures of our toys. I checked your website, but I didn't see an option to add images in the letters section. Ooh, should I just send an email?" Yes, send an email. Send in an email. That'll be yes, do that. Keep up the good work. Well, David Hart, I look forward to seeing your pictures and showing them, which would be great. Stubble McShave sends in a tip and says, "I had a thought, and I don't know if it has merit or not. Here goes. Indy 5 focusing on vampires, more as a mystery than focus on action. Maybe old Indy could work out a traditional Van Helsing type of figure. Could work as a traditional Van Helsing type of figure. This would probably not work, just a thought. Well, if they go into the 60s, it might. I love that." I think that's a great idea. I like that idea. Why not? If you've got aliens, why not delve into vampires? Anonymous says, "Hey, if they're going to cancel things, they should cancel the Seattle Seahawks." Well, the way things are going, that might happen. Yeah, can you believe it? Manny Santos said, "Kia ora, Rob." That's hello in Maori. Well, thank you, Manny. Congrats on Tango Shalom, a delight. Well, I want to thank you for everyone who has watched Tango Shalom. Oh, you know what? People have been sending me, Mike Bodden sending me a message. Let's see what Mike Bodden has to say live. That was a great idea about being able to attach photos to letters to the website. I'll add it tonight. Thanks to our imagination connoisseur who suggested that. Well, that was David Hart. David Hart, we're going to change that. So on the website, you can add photos. So thank you for that. Manny, I'm glad you watched Tango Shalom. That means a lot. Thank you. Thank you to all of you who watched Tango Shalom, by the way, and you were so kind about it. I appreciate that. I know, again, it's not the typical fare for imagination connoisseurs to watch, but I appreciated that people did and that people liked it. I think it's really cool. So thank you very much. Thank you very much. Fernando Barrero became a member. BCH became a member. Fortunato sends in a super chat and says, "Hi, Notorious R&B. Have you heard of Cheryl Vint? She was introduced as a science fiction professor at UC Riverside. She teaches cyberpunk film." No, but I haven't heard of Cheryl Vint, but I'd love to meet someone named Cheryl Vint. What a cool name. That sounds like a cyberpunk name. I wonder if that's a real name. That's cool that UC Riverside is having a cyberpunk class. That's pretty amazing. Thank you, Hashem. Thank you, Hashem sends in a tip. Thank you. That's actually a line that Viviana says in "Thank you, Hashem." Tell him thank you for me. Well, thank you, Hashem. That's very funny. Tibirsk became a member. Dean became a member. Well, thank you all. Chief Cook sends in a super chat and says, "Rob, how would you pitch a new Star Trek series?" I would say, could you make one good? No, if I were to pitch a new Star Trek series, I mean, obviously they've already delved into in season 3 of Discovery the Star Trek series that I wanted to do, which was called Star Trek Federation, and it was about. The Star Trek Federation series that I wanted to make was about a Federation that had just grown old. How do you bring back something how do you restore an idea that's reached middle age? Say like, I don't know, American democracy. The way I thought of my Star Trek series was, if Star Trek as the original series was Kennedy's Camelot brought into space, what happens when the American ideal has become, let's call it hasn't had the maintenance and the upkeep that it needed? So you're basically a country in decline. And how do we bring back the luster? When everybody, the very people in the country, the Vulcans and the Romulans have reunified, the Klingons have become like the Tang dynasty, and the Bajorans and the Cardassians are the Bajorans are exploring things, the Cardassians have moved more back toward being artists, and the Ferengis empire is exploding. I mean, what do you do? How do you bring back the Federation's luster? That was the original idea that I had for Star Trek Federation. But if I was going to do a new Star Trek series, I mean, it's really hard to come up with a new idea. But I think that ultimately, however this would play out, is you really have to do, first of all, any Star Trek series that I made would first and foremost focus on characters that were really good at doing whatever it is they did. I would bring back elitism to Star Trek. I would bring back the idea of a meritocracy, that you're dealing with the people that are the best that exist at what they do. There is no room for mediocrity. There is no every kid gets a trophy. The characters would be, and that doesn't mean that they're perfect people. By no means are they perfect people. They're just really, really good at what they do. Because people who are out on the edge of the final frontier must be the best of the best. They must be the best of the best. And they don't just stumble through life, maybe getting through things by the seat of their pants. I'll tell you that. But, I mean, I would have to think about it, about Chief Cook, how I would pitch. I mean, I don't, other than our Federation idea, if you look up Star Trek Federation online, you can find the idea that Jeffrey Thorne, myself, and Brian Singer and Chris McCory discussed. So that's what I would do. Dennis Chip Chapman sends in a tip and says, "Hi, Rob. Saw Tango Shalom Tuesday night and fell in love with the characters. It's my favorite movie of this young year. Oh, my God. Your excellent editing was perfectly paced. Reminded me of another fave, Silver Linings Playbook, but Tango was much sweeter." We did look at Silver Linings Playbook a lot, believe it or not, especially the end dance scenes, which we wanted to make better. But that's very nice of you, Dennis. Thank you very much for watching the film. I very much appreciate your kind words. That's, I think, what I'm most proud of in the film is the characterizations, and we did try. It was supposed to be sweet, and Joe Bologna, Father Anthony in the movie, who co-wrote the script, he passed away when we were in the middle of finishing the film, so he never got to see the finished version, and that's what I most wanted. I wanted something that sort of was. He was a very nice man, and I wanted the film to be sweet. And we really tried hard for that. Calvin Bowes comes back and says, for his birthday, Braxton got a collectible Star Trek Barbie and Ken as Kirk. Barbie is Janice Rand, and he also got an Imaginix Batcave and a white Tribble. Well, it sounds like Braxton certainly made off like a bandit. Congratulations for being a good father. Again, please give my best to young Braxton. Tell him his 6th year is going to be his best yet. Use Psychology sent in a super chat. Thank you, Use Psychology. Hi, Rob. Bit off topic, but I have to say that the viewing order of the excellent show you recommended was exquisite. Was my first time watching it. Ooh, be seeing you. That was, of course, The Prisoner. I'm glad you liked our order. It was controversial, but I'm glad you liked it. Sheriff Carl sends in a tip and says, this WandaVision shit's been one hell of a ride, boss. I got special joints and snacks all ready to go for tonight and maybe an adult pull-up because shit's going down. You think Falcon and Winter Soldier will tie in much, if at all, to the WandaVision finale? Sheriff Carl, I can't wait. By the way, for those members, we're doing a members chat right after I get off of this. So if you are a member of the channel at a certain level, we'll come on and talk WandaVision in the chat. Right away after this. I think I'm late. I'm going late here. I don't think so. I don't think that we're going to find out about Falcon and Winter Soldier at the end of WandaVision. I do think we're either going to get a huge tease for probably Spider-Man No Way Home. I think that's going to be a big part of it. Or Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness. We're either going to get 1 or 2 big teases for those films. I think where Falcon and Winter Soldier is going to take us, I think it's going to be tied more to Black Widow somehow. I don't know. I know it's it happens after. I guess it happens after. Yeah, I mean, it happens after the blip. So before Black Widow takes place before, but I bet it all ties together somehow. Ricky B says, I enjoyed Tango Shalom so much I watched it 3 times. Well, damn it, that's 3 times that we're not going to get admissions. But okay. Snake Burton says, have you seen the Panos Cosmatos film Mandy? Oh, yes. If so, I would love to know your thoughts on the film. If not, you should. It was my favorite movie of 2018. Mandy is a hoot. If you guys haven't seen Mandy, you know what? The less you know about Mandy going in, the better. But again, it's peak Nicolas Cage, and let's just say it's all about love triumphing. I love Mandy. And by the way, if you love Mandy, if I might, you have to see Panos Cosmatos' first movie, Beyond the Black Rainbow. And there's a movie, don't even read about it. Just either get it or watch it. I have both of those movies on Blu-ray. So Snake Burton, amazing. Jason S. says, oh, great. eBay is now banning the sale of those 6 Dr. Seuss books. I do appreciate how you give us regular updates on how your side is trying to destroy society as we know it. This is a cancer. Well, I can't believe... See, that's the thing. It's one thing for a publisher to decide not to publish a Dr. Seuss book. It's a whole other thing for a company like eBay to come in and not allow the sale of books. I think that's wrong. I think that's absolutely wrong. Because what you're doing then, I mean, those books are available. Are they going to start taking those books away? I mean, I'm totally against that. I am totally against that. I wonder if Amazon will stop selling those books as well. So, Anonymous says, are you familiar with any Orthodox Jewish singers? Like Abraham Fried or Mordecai Ben David, for example. I'm really not. I know Matisyahu. I'll tell you one thing, though. I got really into Nagun singing. And when we were Nagun singing it's not really lyrics, but it's more of like an a cappella. It's kind of like what Elizabeth Fraser from Cocteau Twins did, but it's supposedly divine inspired. And there was a couple of Nagun bands that a couple of them with music that were in the movie for a long time that we pulled out of Tango Shalom. And I really liked that music a lot. As a matter of fact, there's a band, and I'll tell you what the band is if I can find it. I forget their name. I don't know what. Hang on. You know what? They're worth listening to. Hang on. I'm going to find that. Let me go. This one band that I really loved, and I can't. Why am I not? Let's see if I can. Yeah, I knew that I was going to get a million different things. I want to find the name of this band because it's really, you guys would really like it. It's let me see if I can find it. If I can find the band here. Damn, it's not here. Well, you know what? I'll come back to it. I'll find it. But I don't know much about why am I not finding this band? I don't know why we listen to so much of them. But I didn't learn much about Hasidic or Orthodox Jewish singers, so I apologize for that. But we did look up. We wanted to find a lot of authentic, whether it was klezmer band music. We found the Jewish punk band in Gollum, and but we didn't look at Orthodox Jewish singers as much. So, Richard says, eBay banned the 6 Dr. Seuss books. Get the PDFs and publish them on Twitter and keep doing it. If not you, Rob, but it could be you. No matter how many times taken down, keep releasing them, turn them into a meme, reply to censors on Twitter with the pages. You know, it's funny. I look at those things, and one of the things I think is not understood is that, I mean, anybody who's a fan of anime, there's a lot of problematic depictions of people in anime right now in brand new things. And, it's not like, look, did Dr. Seuss make propagandistic wartime cartoons that were horribly offensive in terms of the stereotyping? Yes, but so did Disney. So did Warner Brothers. Everybody was making wartime propaganda cartoons that were horribly racist because we were fighting against the Japanese. It was a sneak attack. That's why they did that. And I again, we've got to take into consideration when these things were done and why they were done. And how people learn to draw, as somebody pointed out yesterday. Julian M says James R. Kirk was a jab at Kirk by Gary from their academy days. Kirk was short and Gary always called him runt. Laugh out loud. You know what? That goes into my head canon. Maybe not that Kirk was short, but yes, that for sure. Called him James Runt Kirk. I like it. That's canonical. That makes sense to me. Boom. There you go. Richard, I think now it's amazing how people have just jumped on the bandwagon. Claudia says, Bonjour, Robert. So Candida and I enjoyed watching Tango Shalom last night. Did you choose to focus on medium shots to build tension? Did they shoot the sequence with a wide shot? We love Tango and would have loved to see Karina show off in a wide shot. I'll tell you something. We did as much as we could have with what was there. Let me put it to you that way. Like at the end, the whole tango competition, it took us the final dance, but this is sort of funny. So there's a spoiler alert, there's a final dance where our main characters dance in competition. It took us 6 weeks to cut that dance for a number of reasons. Part of them were cameramen crossing in front of each other because they didn't know what they were doing. It was bad. That's not our DP's fault because Massimo Zeri did not shoot that final dance sequence. But yeah, it was we would have liked to have done more of that. Let's just say that we tried to maximize all the stuff we had there. But yes, I would like to have seen Karina show off in more wide shots too, like anybody would want to do. But I'm glad you enjoyed it. But yeah, it really was. Let's put it this way: we always chose the best shot we had for whatever shot we were using. The best shot we had. That's the problem with low budget movies. Murray Reich sends in I'm glad you watched it though. I'm glad you guys enjoyed it. Murray Reich sends in a tip and says, "Where can I watch Tango Shalom? Will it premiere in NYC? We hope so. The next place it's going, it's in Charlotte, North Carolina now, although I think it might be over. It's in Sacramento. Then it's going to be, I can't say, it's going to Florida. It might be in 2 different festivals in Florida, but I can't say which ones they are, which one is first. But, if there's a big city in Florida that's, by the sea, I know that might not help anybody, but if there's a big city in Florida by the sea, it might be at a Jewish film festival at that place in Florida. And if there's another city that isn't that other city that has a large Jewish population of, say, retirees, it might be in that city too, but I can't say. So in terms of all that, yeah, you'll see it. And hopefully it'll play in Brooklyn. I mean, it's so weird that there's festivals in New York where we're still talking to. I'd love it to play in New York, considering it was filmed there. Claudia says after party. I know I got to jump onto the after party. Calvin says Braxton also wants to know in City on the Edge of Forever, how at the end did they beam up 7 people when the transporters only had 6 pads? I love Braxton. Well, here's what happens, Braxton. Here's my answer to this is that you can beam up. If you look at the Star Trek episode Day of the Dove in the 3rd season, where there's both the Klingon crew and the human crew, they can beam more than just 6 people up, but they keep them suspended in transit. One person will be suspended in transit, still be there. They rematerialize 6 people. Those people get off the pad, and then the 7th person is rematerialized. So that's how they were able to separate the Klingons from the Enterprise crew in Day of the Dove. So that is a canonical explanation for you. Anonymous says, or are you familiar with the Black Orthodox Jewish rapper Nissim Black? He's really good. We played with I can say this, we played with all kinds of songs and music. We wanted to focus. Anytime we could add, we were looking for rap songs, and we did. There is a rap song in the film. This is actually kind of a sad story. In Tango Shalom, the rapper that kind of teases Moshe at the beginning when they're the hip-hop artists that are dancing on the street that taunt Moshe that he later goes and moonwalks with, that lead guy, his name was Scars Cigars, and he passed away also from the time the movie was shot to the time we released it. So we used his music in the movie. Well, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, kind souls, gentle beings from across the 28 known galaxies, I'm going to end Robservations episode number 634. I didn't even get to half the letters. I have so many good letters. But thank you for all writing in. I love it when people write in great letters. Thank you all for being here. I very much appreciate that. I want to thank everybody who supports the channel through tips and super chats and most of all letters. My God, I'm telling you, we have the best audience ever, with the most thoughtful people ever, and it's fantastic. I want to thank my moderating staff, beginning with Mike Bodden and, of course, the Richard. I think we have new moderators. Brian Hepburn is here. Joshua Levesque is here. Josh Rozowskis is here. Thank you all for being here. Justin Toner is here. Justin Jorgensen is here. Well, who else is here? There's so many people here. I want to thank you all for being the moderating staff that you are. I think I got everybody. And I want to thank also all the people that do support this channel in every other way. And if you want to write letters, you can go to the website at theburnettwork.net, send me letters, and now Mike is going to allow you to send pictures as well. And next week on Fully Articulated on Wednesday, join Az and Justin Kane from Justin's Collection, my favorite YouTube channel on Hot Toys on the web. Justin's Collection, he's now moved into his new house. He's got his new collection, well, his old collection, but set up in a new dig. He's got a new studio setup where we can look at him. I don't know what our subject matter is going to be, but it's all good, whatever it is. Very, very exciting. I'm very excited. So meet us there next week and all of that. Remember, every person you meet has a story to tell that you have yet to hear, and all you have to do is listen. And with that, I would say to everybody, remember, if you're members, we'll go over to our member after-party chat, and we'll talk a little WandaVision and all that. If you want to become a member of the channel, you can. Please do so. That would be great. And, yeah. And also, hit subscribe. Smash the like button. We need those likes. They help the analytics, help grow the channel. And hit that notification bell, because people are saying that they don't get notifications, and I don't understand that. But now that you know every person you meet has a story to tell, all you have to do is listen. All that, remember, that's a good philosophy to have. And on that note, I say to all of you, I'll be back on the John Campea Show tomorrow, probably talking WandaVision, and Robservations will be back tomorrow. And Whining About Movies is coming back this weekend, where we were watching All That Jazz and Local Hero. All That Jazz Saturday and Local Hero Sunday. Bill Forsyth's Local Hero. What a lovely movie that is, by the way. And on that note, have a better day.